Okay, so we are on Daf Kufav Amid Aleph on the second line, and of course we're talking about the mitzvah of Netilas Yadayim, but there's actually three different types of water use. The Netilas Yadayim before the meal, before you eat bread. There's Mayim Achronim at the end of the meal before you bench. And then there's Mayim Emtsa'iyim, middle waters, to divide if you're having a dairy meal and then right afterwards a meat meal, which we don't do so much anymore because it's not normally the pattern of our eating. Let's take a look at the third line of the Gemara. Ki asar Rav Dimi Omar, Mayim harishonim he'echilu b'sar chazir, achronim hotziu es ha'isha mibala. Now, the Gemara is making reference to a much lengthier two stories in Maseches Yoma, which I'm going to just say outside for just a moment. The first story is that there was a man who owned a meat shop, a butcher shop, which sold both kosher and non-kosher meat. Don't tell the COR about this, they would never go for it. But in those days, that was what was done. And he would sell the kosher meat to the kosher consumer, and he would sell the non-kosher meat to non-Jews. And what happened was that a man walked into the store and took a bite out of a sandwich without washing Netilas Yadayim. So the butcher assumed that he was a Gentile, and he gave him pig meat, sold him pig meat. So it was because of the lack of washing, Mayim Rishonim, that a fellow ate pig meat. And of course, the Marav Ronshberg says, how could it be that a Jew would sell pig meat? Even if he's selling it to Gentiles, you're not allowed to deal with pig meat, halachically. And he says you have to say that this was an exceptional situation. It could have been that there were government rules in place that required him to sell it, but whatever the case may be.
Who says the Jew was selling it?
Because the story is about a Jew who sold another Jew pig meat, gave another Jew pig meat. The second story is even more colorful, and it is the story about two Tanoim, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who were traveling together, and they stopped off at an inn. And the innkeeper's name was a man named Kedor. And Rabbi Meir said, well, if you look into people's names, you can see what they're like. And he says, Kedor must be a bad person because it's based on a pasuk, Kedor tapuchos hema, for they are an upside-down generation, an upheavaled generation. And so therefore he said, I don't trust this guy Kedor based on his name. And so when Kedor said, would you like to leave your money bags with me for security, Reb Meir demurred, right? And Reb Yehuda said, okay. I'm shortening the story. There's a lot more to the story. When it came time to collect his money, Rabbi Yehuda says, "Can I have my wallet?" And the Kedor says, "I don't know what you're talking about." So the question is, how are we going to get it? How is Rabbi Yehuda going to get his money? So he took some of his talmidim, and they took Kedor to the tavern, and they started giving him some drinks, and they noticed that on his mustache there was some dried lentils from dinner. So quickly, Rabbi Yehuda runs to Kedor's inn, knocks on the door of the innkeeper's wife, and says, your husband told us that we should ask you for the money that he was holding for us, and the sign is that he had lentils for dinner. Whereas if you want to know that we were speaking to your husband, he had lentils for dinner. He told us he had lentils for dinner, and that's how you know that we're telling you the truth. So she gives Rabbi Yehuda the money. And then when Kedor comes home and he finds out what his wife has done, he divorced her. Now, had he washed Mayim Achronim, this guy Kedor...
Oh, he's Jewish.
Yeah, of course he's Jewish.
Yeah. These are all Jewish guys.
Jewish guys. Now, if
nice
Kedor...
Jewish guys.
He wasn't a nice guy, but he could have still been Jewish. Had Kedor washed Mayim Achronim, and he would have passed the water over his mustache, then they would have never known what he had for dinner. So it was because of Mayim Achronim, or the lack thereof, that a man divorced his wife. Okay? So, Ki asar Rabin Omar Rishonim he'achilu b'sar nevela achronim hargu es hanafesh. And Rabin said, I have a different version of both stories. The first story was not that the butcher fed the guy pig meat, but rather nevela meat, which is not as bad, but it's still treif, right? Carrion. And the story of Kedor was actually worse than what you described it. It wasn't that he divorced his wife, but that he killed his wife. Yeah. So he was really bad. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, which just goes to show you that, anyway, I won't say it. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, v'simanech asa Rav Dimi afka asa Rabin katla. The way to remember this mnemonically, we know, Rashi points out, that Rav Dimi precedes Rabin chronologically. So Rav Dimi, the first one, his version was divorce, and Rabin's version was killed. Okay? Rabbi Abba masni chada mehani v'chada mehani l'chumra. And Rabbi Abba's version of the stories is that he had versions of the story where both things were the most stringent.
Pork and killing.
Pork and killing, right? Those were his versions of the story. Itzmar, Chame Ha'or. Now we go on to another discussion. Now yesterday the Gemara had quoted a brisa that says that to use heated water, hot water, is perfectly fine for netilas yadayim before the meal. However, now we're going to see that there's a controversy on that subject. That Chame Ha'or, Chizki Amar ein notlin mehem liyadayim, v'Rabbi Yochanan Amar notlin mehem liyadayim. That when it comes to water, cold water that was heated by a fire, so Chizkiya says you cannot use it for netilas yadayim. Now the Gemara had said that my machronim everyone agrees is a problem for hot water, because hot water, instead of causing the bad smell that lingers on your hands after eating a meal, causes the bad smell to absorb further into the tissue, whereas cold water actually helps remove it. So that was the reason for making a distinction between hot water and cold water. So hot water, Chizkiya says, even for netilas yadayim before the meal, I hold you cannot use. And Rabbi Yochanan says, notlin mehem liyadayim, it's perfectly fine. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Sha'alti es Rabbi Gamliel beno shel Rabbi va'ochel taharos v'amar li kol gedolei Galilos in Cain. And Rabbi Yochanan says, my proof is, to wit, I spoke once to Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and he used to always wash before eating anything because he always used to eat CHULLIN in a state of tahara. And he told me that all of the great people in the Galilee used to wash their hands with hot water. Now, why would they use hot water? Well, imagine in the Galilee in the winter, it's probably cold. Not as cold as Toronto, but cold. And so you wouldn't want to wash with cold water, so they heated up the water. So you see there's nothing wrong with it. Now, the next discussion is Chame Tveria. And as Rashi points out, Chame Tveria is hot springs, the hot springs of the Tiberias.
They're still there?
Yeah, they're still there. Now, what's the difference between water heated and Chame Tveria and hot springs?
Sulfur.
Well, heated water with a fire, at least at one time, was cold, and now is brought to a higher temperature. So there's more of a reason to be lenient. But water that was never cold at all from its inception and was always hot, so then there's more reason to be machmir. That's what Rashi says. So Chizkiya Amar ein notlin mehem liyadayim, aval matbilin bahem hayadayim. So Chizkiya says, you cannot use it for netilas yadayim, but you're allowed to immerse your hands into the hot springs. If you want to use it like a mikveh, that would be okay. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar kol gufo tovel bahen aval lo panav yadav v'raglav. And Rabbi Yochanan says you can immerse your whole body in Chame Tveria to use it as a mikveh, but you cannot wash your face, your hands, and your feet. And that doesn't seem to, that's counterintuitive, because the Gemara says, Hashta kol gufo tovel bahem panav yadav v'raglav kol shekain. If you can immerse your whole body in the hot springs, then why can't you immerse your hands, your feet, and your face? That doesn't seem to make any sense. So the Gemara says, Amar of Papa b'makoman dekule almalo pligi deshari, and mishkol minayu b'mana dekule almalo pligi de'aser. So Rav Papa says, let me clarify the machlokas here. Everyone agrees that if you want to immerse any portion of your body in the hot springs of Tveria, that's perfectly legit. It's like a mikveh. But everyone also agrees that Chame Tveria, unlike heated water, Chame Tveria you cannot use for netilas yadayim by scooping out water in a utensil and pouring it over your hands. That everyone agrees you cannot do. But ki pligi de paskinu bevas birta, mar sover gazrinan bas birta atumana, or mar sover lo gazrina. The machlokus is, what if you dig a small little groove, like a trench, small trench off to the side of the hot springs, and there's a little groove that allows the water to flow over into this little puddle that you've made, and you want to be able to stick your hands and your feet in there. Now, technically, that should be okay because it's all connected to the mikveh of the hot springs. However, the one who says that you can't, which is Rabbi Yochanan, says you can't put your hands and feet in there, it says, because if we let you do that, you may be tempted to scoop out the water with a kli and pour it over your hands. So therefore, across the board, we're going to ban it. And the other Manda Amar says, Chizkiya holds that it's okay, as long as you're using it as a mikvah, even if you dig a little trench on the side, that's okay. Kitanai, and this is actually a machlokas tanoim, Maim shenifsalu mishatias behema bekelim pisulim bekarka kisherin. That if water is no longer potable for animals, like even an animal wouldn't drink that water, so then you cannot use it for netilas yadayim if you're using it from a kli, pouring it from a utensil. That's part of the gezerah that the rabbis made, that the water at least has to be potable for an animal. But if it's not potable for an animal, then you can still use it as a mikvah, and therefore you can stick your hands into a mikvah where the water is not potable. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, af bekarka tovel bahen kol gufa v'lo panav yada v'raglav. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, well, it depends. To immerse your whole body is okay, but just to stick in your hands, your feet, and your face is not okay. So again, counterintuitive. Hashta kol gufo tovel bahen panav yada v'raglav lo kol shekain. If you can immerse your whole body, then surely just sticking in a portion of your body should be acceptable. So elalav de paskinu bevasbirta uvahapligi de marsover gazrinan basbirta atuman marsover lo gazrinan. So it must be that this is the same machlokas. What they're discussing, Rav Shimon ben Elazar is discussing, is when you dig a little type of puddle off to the side, and it's connected by a groove to the larger mikvah. That's where he says, I hold that you cannot do that, because if we allow you to do that, you may draw the water with a kli, and since it's not potable, it's not good.
Is that because of the heat? Are we talking about the heat now?
No, here this is a different... No. This is about water that's not potable now. Okay. Before we were talking about hot water, right, the hot springs. Now we're talking about non-potable water. And what we're saying is that here, because the water could not be used in a kli, if you scooped it out of the mikveh, therefore the rabbis did not allow you to use a diverted puddle off to the side. But with a mikveh, as in a situation like this, it would be okay. In other words, as long as all the water is connected, you could have a little tributary off to the side and still use it to immerse your vessels. That would be okay. But this is a rabbinic fence around the law. Okay?
Yeah, they say here the ground makes it putrid. That's the reason.
It doesn't matter what the reason is, but honestly, it doesn't matter. It could be putrid because of the ground. It could be putrid for any reason. The point is that you can't use it for netilas yadayim, because when the rabbis were gozer netilas yadayim in a kli, they said it has to be potable. Amar of Idi Bar.
The rabbis made a decree that you have to use a utensil.
You have to use a utensil if you're pouring it over your hands. If you're not pouring it over your hands, but you're immersing your hands in a mikveh, then you don't have to have a vessel.
So technically we could wash before bread if we were near a mikveh.
If you have a mikveh, and you want to just, let's say you're at a picnic and there's a lake, you can just stick your hands in the lake for netilas yadayim. You don't have to pour water over them. Okay? Assuming that the lake is a kosher mikveh, which most lakes are. Amar of Idi bar Abin, Amar of Yitzchak bar Ashian, netilas yadayim l'chulin mitnei srach truma, va'od mishum mitzvah. So he says like this. He says that the whole takana that the rabbis made to require us to wash our hands before eating bread for chulin is only because of a concern for truma. Meaning that, and this is a very important principle, the rabbis made a gezerah, and we're not going to go into the whole rigmarole as to why they did, but for now let's just understand. They made a gezerah that any person's hands, even if the person had just went to mikveh, his hands are shnios l'tumah. His hands have an automatic status of being a sheni l'tumah, a secondary level of tumah. That's a derabanan status, and such that if he were to touch truma or kudshim, he would make them tameh unless he washes his hands in advance. Now, that's only an issue for truma and kudshim. It's not an issue for chulin, because if a sheni touches chulin, the chulin is not in any way tainted. Only truma can get tainted from a sheni l'tumah. And therefore, the whole reason that they required hand washing is only because lest you come to handle truma. Or they wanted us to get into the habit of knowing how to treat truma. And they said, therefore, for all food, even for chulin, wash your hands. Do netilas yadayim before. And the second reason is because of a mitzvah. Now that's a very ambiguous statement, no? First reason is because of truma. Second reason is because it's a mitzvah. Now what does that mean? My mitzvah, Amar Abaye, mitzvah lishmoa divrei chachamim. It's a mitzvah to listen to the words of the sages, which doesn't really make sense, because anytime the rabbis make a takana, it's a mitzvah to listen to them. So Tosfos just clarifies, and he says the additional mitzvah here is that the rabbis wanted you to be clean, your hands to be clean before you ate. The rabbis learned from your mother. Your mother says, wash your hands before you eat because cleanliness is next to godliness. The rabbis felt the same way. You should have clean hands before you eat. Now, Rava Amar mitzvah lishmoa divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. So Rava says that's not what the word mitzvah means here, but rather there's a great sage by the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Arach who said that if you look at one of the psukim in the Torah, we could see the basis for why the rabbis instituted hand washing before chulin. Not that the Torah itself is communicating that, but once the rabbis decided to institute this, they found the support in the Torah, which is what we call an asmachta, which means the Torah is not really communicating it, but using reverse engineering, if we want to be able to find a support in the Torah for a rabbinic decree, we can use this pasuk as our mnemonic reminder. The Torah says that anything that a zav, a person who has a gonorrheal emission, if he touches something without going to mikvah, he renders that item tameh. Now it says over there that if he didn't wash his hands, he renders it tameh, which doesn't make any sense, because the zav can't just wash his hands and be tahor. He's got to go to mikvah to become tahor. So what the pasuk, it doesn't really make any sense. And the Gemara in Maseches Nida tells us what the pasuk actually means, which we're not going to go into now. But the point is that Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Arach mikan samchu chachamim l'netilas yadayim min haTorah. This is therefore the asmachta support for why the rabbis instituted netilas yadayim. Amar le Rav Rav Nachman, my mashma. Where do you see that in the pasuk? The pasuk's not talking about a regular person; it's talking about a zav. So dichsiv yadav lo shataf b'mayim hashataf tahora tefila boy, because the pasuk says that if he doesn't wash his hands, he renders the item tameh. What does that imply? That if he did wash his hands, he does not render an item tameh? That doesn't make any sense. He hasn't gone to mikvah. So elahachi kamar ve'acher shalosh shataf tameh. But the way that we could read the pasuk in order to support the rabbinic decree is that a zav has one halachic status, and a person who's not a zav, who doesn't wash his hands, renders items tameh, which is a very, it's a very kvetchy kind of reading of the pasuk. But again, we're not using it to tell me that this is what the Torah actually meant, but rather to say that this is a mnemonic indicator that the rabbinic decree is justified. And that's what the word mitzvah means. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Oshia, lo amru netilas yadayim leperos ela mishum nikius. So Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Oshia that the reason why the rabbis told us to wash our hands before eating produce is because of cleanliness. There's no other reason, because the decree was only initially on bread because of a concern for truma, but not for other food items. And therefore, when the rabbi said to wash your hands before fruit, it's only because of cleanliness. So savar mina chovahu deleka ha-mitzvah ika. So the thinking is that what he's essentially saying is that there's no technical halachic requirement to wash for fruit, but it is advocated. It's a mitzvah. In other words, lechatchila, you should strive to do this because it's a virtuous thing to do.
This is orchatz, right?
What?
We do this with orchatz.
Well, that's an interesting point, why we do orchatz. Some say it's because of this reason, of washing before fruit. So Amar lahu Rava, lo chova velo mitzvah ela rishus. So Rava says, I disagree. I hold that it is neither advocated, it's neither an obligation, nor is it advocated, but rather it's optional, totally optional at the discretion of the person. Upliga de Rav Nachman, Damar Rav Nachman, Hanotel Yadav Leperos Ela Migase Haruach. And this actually, there's a fourth position, which is Rav Nachman, who says, I disagree with all the aforementioned. I hold that it is preferable not to wash your hands before eating fruit, because anyone who does so demonstrates that he is overly fastidious and therefore has an inflated ego. Because be a man. Just pick up an apple and eat it. What do you have to wash your hands? What are you so dainty for? So Amar Rabba bar Barchana hava ka'imna kamei de Rebbe Ami veRebbe Asi aisu lekamayhu kalkola de peri ve'achlu velo mashu yadayu velo yahavu limidi uborechad chad lechude. So he says, Rabba bar Barchana says, I was once sitting in front of these two great Israeli Amoraim, Rebbe Ami and Rebbe Asi. They brought out a basket of fruit for these two sages, and I noticed three things. First of all, they ate the fruit without washing their hands first. Secondly, they didn't offer me any of the fruit. And the third thing that I noticed is that when it came time to say the bracha achrona, each one said it separately, and it's not that one said it and the other one said Amen. So, Shema Mina Tlas, I derive three things from this experience. Shema Mina ein netilas yadayim leperos. First of all, I learned that you don't have to wash your hands before eating fruit. Ushma mina ein mizamnin al haperos. I also inferred from here that there's no obligation to create a zimun when you're eating produce. In other words, to create a communal bracha of a zimun like you have by Birkas Hamazon, where if two people are eating bread and there's a third guy, it's virtuous to offer him a piece of bread so that you can create a zimun. They didn't offer me. So therefore, I noticed from that there was no advantage of creating a zimun. And the third thing I learned is ushma mina shnaim sha'achlu mitzvah lichalek. And when two people are saying a bracha achrona, and this is true by both Birkas Hamazon and all bracha achronas, that it is preferred that each one says his own Birkas Hamazon, an own bracha achrona, and not that one should say it and the other one should answer amen.
Is it mashma that the Paris was yavish? Otherwise, they would have been told differently.
No, there's no mashmos here. We're not going to get into that right now. If you want to take a look at the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Vilna Gaon, who says that for fruit it is considered virtuous to wash if the fruit has moisture on it. Tanya nami hachi shnaim sha'achlu mitzvah lichalek. And we have a brisa to support this, that when two people are saying a bracha achrona or benching, each one is preferred to say his own bracha achrona. So bamed dvar mamurim shayu shneim soifrim avol echad sofer vechad bur sofer mivarechu bur yotzi. But that's only true if both of them are scholarly and can say the bracha independently. But let's say one is scholarly and the other one is an ignoramus. Then instead of having the guy try to break his teeth and fumfer over the words, it is better for the person who is well-versed and literate to say it for the person who is not literate, and then have him answer amen. Tana Rabbanan, netilas yadayim l'chul.
Today we bench out loud when you had a non-from.
Well,
non-from simchas.
Right, exactly. Tana Rabbanan, netilas yadayim l'chulin ad haperek, l'truma ad haperek, kiddush yadayim v'reglaim b'mikdash ad haperek. And the way that Rashi and Rabbeinu Gershom understand these words is that we're talking about three different levels. Even though each one says that where does the water have to go up to? Until the joint. Now, there are many joints in the hands. So what the Gemara is essentially saying is that when it comes to washing your hands for eating CHULLIN, it only has to go up to the first joint, which is the middle joint of the fingers, until the middle joints, right over here. For Truma, you should wash up until the knuckles. And for the Kohanim, before they do temple worship, they have to wash their hands and feet with the kior, with the laver, and the water has to go over their hands up until the wrist.
That's what you do today with Birchas Kohanim? All the way to the wrist?
All the way to the wrist. Now, as a matter of course, we do Netilas Yadayim also all the way to the wrist for CHULLIN.
Oh, Kohanim.
No, every person. Every person, when you wash for Hamotzi, you have to wash your... Yeah,
What do you think you do?
up until the wrist. Yeah, no, up until the wrist. Now, the Gemara is telling us one shita, that it only has to go up until the middle joints of the fingers, but as a matter of halacha, at least lechatchila, you have to wash until the wrist. Yeah. Now, the next thing is v'chol davar shechotzeitz b'tvila baguf chotzeitz b'netilas yadayim l'chul. And furthermore, anything that creates an obstruction, a chatzitza, for going to the mikveh, such as if a person has paint on their body, they have to remove the paint before going to mikveh. The same thing would apply for netilas yadayim. If you have some kind of obstruction on the skin, you have to remove it before washing your hands. Uvekidash yadayim raglayim b'mikdash, and the same thing for the kohanim washing their hands in the temple. Amar Rav, ad kan l'chulin, ad kan l'truma. So Rav was demonstrating to his students one day, and he said, up until here, the middle joint of the finger for chulin, up until here, the knuckles for truma. And Ushmuel Amar, ad kan bein l'chulin, bein l'truma, l'chumra. And Shmuel said, no, for both chulin and truma, you have to wash until the knuckles. Okay? And Rav Sheshes Amar, ad kan bein l'chulin, bein l'truma, l'kula. And Rav Sheshes said, no, truma and chulin are the same. You only have to wash until the middle joint of the fingers. He was more lenient. Amar bar Haja hava ka'imna kamei de Rebbe Ami, v'amar ad kan bein l'chulin, bein l'truma, l'chumra. That I was once standing in front of Rebbe Ami, and he was giving instruction and telling his students that for both chulin and truma, it has to be until the knuckles. V'lo tema Rebbe Ami mishum de kohenhu, deha Rebbe Maisha bar berei de Rebbe Yeshua ben Levi hu livoi, v'amar ad kan bein l'chulin bein l'truma l'chumra. And don't think that the reason why Rebbe Ami was machmir was because Rebbe Ami was a kohen, and therefore because he handled truma more, he felt that you should be machmir with chulin as much as you are with truma, but perhaps for a Yisrael you could be more lenient. I'll prove to you that that's not the case, because I was once with the grandson of Rebbe Yeshua ben Levi, who himself was a Levi, and he held the same thing, that for both chulin and truma you have to be machmir and wash until the knuckles. So even though you're not a regular truma handler, you still have to be machmir.
So where did this wrist thing come from? We haven't said it yet.
Yeah, so it comes from the post Gemara, it seems like, yeah? Amar Rav, no tel adam eshtei yadav shachris umasna leim kol hayom kulo. Now Rav says an even bigger chiddush, and he says that if you want, you can wash your hands in the morning, like when you wash Nagelwasser, and you could use that to cover any netilas yadayim that you need over the day. So if by lunch you want to have a sandwich, it's perfectly fine to rely on the netilas yadayim that you did in the morning.
Because you make the bracha.
Rashi says, not because you made the bracha, but because your hands are clean.
Oh.
So Rashi says, provided that you're careful between the morning and lunch to make sure that your hands don't get dirty and have not come in contact with any tumah. Now that's a very difficult thing to do, but if you can be mindful of that, then it's perfectly fine.
You go on the subway.
So, I mean, well, let's say you're not going on the subway. Let's say you're going straight from Shacharis to the base medrash and you're learning Gemara all morning.
Oh, yeah.
So then you can have your sandwich without having to wash.
Eat it too.
What?
And don't go to the bathroom.
Yeah, there you go. So, Amar lahu Rebbe Avina livnei pakta da aravos kegon atundelo shchichi lechumaya mashu yadaichu mitzafra va'asnu alayhu lekula yoma. So Rebbe Avina said to these people who lived in a valley, in a place called Aravos, he said, you folks, where water by you is a scarcity, this is what you can rely on. Right. Just wash your hands in the morning, because water is so scarce, it's not available to you. And therefore you can, as long as you keep an eye on your hands for the rest of the day, you don't have to wash for the rest of the day. Yeah. Now, Ika da Amri bishas hadechak in shlo bishas hadechak lo upliga derav. So it's a question as what exactly did Rav Avina mean? Did he mean to say that I'm only giving you this heter because it's a dire situation where you live, and therefore I disagree with Rav because Rav says you can always do this whether it's dire or not? Or does Rav Avina mean to say, like Rav, that it doesn't matter whether it's dire or not, you can rely on this, and it just so happens that he was speaking to the people of this place where water was scarce, but that's not a requirement. So it's unclear. By the way, again, as a matter of course in halacha, we don't rely on this. In other words, even though you have clean hands and you've been purelling all day, right, since you washed your hands and you've been awake, you still have to do netilas yadayim before you eat a sandwich. Amar Rav Papa, Hai arisa de daloi einot lemimenu liyadayim delo asu mikoach gavra. So here's an interesting new thing that's been introduced, which is that you need what's called koach gavra. When you wash your hands from a utensil for netilas yadayim, the water has to flow from human inertia.
That's why we have the cup.
Right, that's why we have a cup. That's why you can't just turn on the faucet and let the water flow out onto your hands because it's not coming from human inertia. Okay, you need to pour it into a cup and pour the water out of the cup. Now, as a matter of halacha, in a dire situation where there's no cup available, so what the poskim say, I think it's from Rav Moshe or maybe the Mishnah Berurah, what you can do is stick your hand under the tap, turn on the faucet, turn off the faucet, and that counts as a washing. But lechatchila, you should not rely on that. Lechatchila, you need to have a kli, and you need to have what's called koach gavra, where a human being is pouring out the water.
This is all because hands have this special...
It's a rabbinic takana. It's a rabbinic takana that they wanted to make sure that we were careful about this. And so they said it's got to be dafka a certain way, the water's got to be a certain quality, the utensil has to be a certain quality, and it has to be poured out in a certain way. Now, the example that the illustration that the Gemara gives is that let's say there's an aqueduct where the laborers would connect the aqueduct to the river, and the aqueduct would run all the way to the fields that are, let's say, a few yards away, and they would pour water from the river onto the aqueduct. It would flow down and irrigate the fields. So let's say I'm by the fields and I see this stream of water coming out of the aqueduct. Can I stick my hands out and count that as netilas yadayim? So the Gemara says you cannot, because since the aqueduct may be several tens of yards long, it's no longer considered koach gavra by the time the water flows out to you because it's already been running through a pipe.
Same with a waterfall.
Or, well, a waterfall
wouldn't count, right?
A waterfall is also not koach gavra, but here there are guys pouring the water into the aqueduct,
so far away.
But since it's so far away, it's not an immediate koach gavra.
What is koach gavra?
From human inertia. V'i mekarev legabe dula dekasu mikoach gavra notli mimenu liyadayim. However, if you're by the source, if you're starting off at the beginning of the aqueduct and you just put your hands under where they're pouring the water, so then it is coming mikoach gavra, and therefore it's acceptable. V'ibazia dula bekones mashka melaf laifi umat bilba es hayadayim. Now, what happens if they're using utensils that have holes in them to pour the water from the river into the aqueduct? So if there is a stream of water that is flowing through these holes, that is connecting the river of the body of the river to the utensils through that stream of water, then you could technically use the kli and stick your hands in that kli to use it sort of like an extension of the river. So that would be legal. However, va'amarava kli shenikev bekones mashka einot li mimenu liyadayim. But that's only because you're sticking your hands in the kli. But let's say you wanted them, the kli has big holes in it, and you want them to pour the water over your hands. That would not work, because Rava said that if the kli has holes in it, it's not a kosher kli for netilas yadayim. So if you're going to use the kli as an extension of the river because there's a stream of water connecting it to the riverbed, so then you can use it like a mikveh, stick your hands into the bucket as if you're sticking them into the river, and it's fine. But if they're pouring the water from utensils that are filled with holes, and they're pouring it over your hands, that doesn't help for netilas yadayim, because you have to have clean water, you have to have vessels without holes, and you have to have koach gavra in order to have a kosher netilas yadayim.
So a broken netilas yadayim cup, no good.
A broken netilas yadayim cup is no good. That's exactly right, and that's codified in Shulchan Aruch as well. So,
holes in it, not
Like
just
if it has a hole in it,
yeah, it's right.
Even though it's 99% good, if it has a hole in it.
If it's got a hole that
Throw it
such
out.
that the water's flowing out,
Or a crack.
right? Well, if the crack doesn't leak, then it's okay. But if
A
it's
leaking crack.
if it's a leaky crack, so then it's a problem.
Throw it in.
Okay, and this is where we'll hold it
Sorry.
for today. Okay. What?